Well, of the 3,522 Queenslanders we tested in the last testing period, we again returned 0 positive results. That is, all of those tests returned negative, meaning we still have just those 4 active cases. That compares to, in other states, now 18 active cases in New South Wales as of yesterday, and in Victoria 1,612 active cases. And of course, we will monitor throughout the day the number of cases reported in those 2 states. I can also confirm that 18 Queenslanders who had visited the Crossroads Hotel have now been tested. The results of those tests are not yet back, but we thank them for their assistance and for agreeing to be tested. The Chief Health Officer in a moment will outline her intention today to issue directions which will create identify hotspots in New South Wales, in Campbelltown City and Liverpool City as a result of that Crossroads Hotel outbreak, and she will outline for you what that means. I can also announce today that this week in Parliament we will further strengthen our public health laws, further strengthen the powers available to the state to keep Queenslanders safe. Right now, the maximum penalty on the spot for breaching our public health orders is $4,003, but in some cases, that fine appears to not be a sufficient penalty. Perhaps people from other states think they might get away without having to pay for it. Perhaps people think that $4,000 is worth it to come to Queensland, worth the risk. So this week, we will move amendments that will allow us to apply a penalty of imprisonment for breaches of those health directions. So the maximum penalty on the spot will be $4,003 or up to 6 months imprisonment. And I hope that that will demonstrate to the public just how serious we are about enforcing these measures, just how serious it is that everyone complies with them, and just how serious the penalty might be if they fail to do so.
So today in Queensland there are 18 people who visited the Crossroads Hotel in New South Wales and came forward and have been tested. They're all now in home quarantine. As of midday today, I've now declared that Campbelltown City and Liverpool City are both hotspots, which means anyone who has been in those areas in the previous 14 days and comes into Queensland will need to go into mandatory hotel quarantine. This is important because we are seeing continued numbers of cases being confirmed who attended that hotel, and we've seen subsequent infections in families and other groups from people who have come into contact with people who went to that hotel. Thank you.
Chief Health Officer, so does that mean that if Queenslanders travel to those areas, when they come back, they will have to go into hotel quarantine, or can Queenslanders go into home quarantine?
As of midday today, Queenslanders who travel to either of those hotspots or any of the hotspots in Victoria, and today all of Victoria is deemed a hotspot, will need to, when they come back into Queensland, go into 14 days quarantine in a hotel.
Are you looking at New South Wales broadly now, like as a state? Is that going to be something you're looking at in coming days, like you've said about Victoria, if it gets...
Yes, I'm looking at the whole country every single day. So I meet with my colleagues from around Australia every day and we talk about outbreaks that are happening in their states.
The 18 people that are here now who've been to the Crossroads Hotel, are they Queenslanders or are they people who were coming here to holiday from other states?
I don't have that specific information, but all of them I'm very, very grateful to. They came forward and they said they had been to the hotel and they got tested.
Is that the total number of people you know who are currently in Queensland who have been to the hotel, and do you anticipate that number to grow at all?
I do anticipate it to grow, yes. That's the total I know of at this point in time.
The threshold you have to reach to declare a hotspot, what are you looking at?
It's when there's clearly growing numbers of cases and there's community acquisition of cases. So we've seen that here. We've seen initial cases of people who went to that hotel on the 3rd of July, and then we've seen subsequent infections from those cases.
Dr. Young, can you explain why Danny Minogue and her son were given an exemption?
No, they weren't given an exemption. They are required to quarantine in a different place. So the default arrangement in Queensland is if you don't have a COVID safe plan or an industry plan or an exemption to hotel quarantine, then you go into hotel quarantine. There are a large number of different groups that have exemptions to hotel quarantine. For instance, consular officials, ADF personnel, people who work in the oil and gas industry who meet certain requirements, maritime workers, flight crew, people who work in specific film and entertainment industry, elite sporting groups. So there are a number of groups, and I believe I've given 38 such exemptions to date for mandatory hotel quarantine, but they need to then quarantine in another place that I'm satisfied adheres to the same requirements.
Given some of the heartbreaking stories we've had and you've had to wrestle with, people who have dying family members, can you assure people that there's no special treatment for a celebrity?
No, there's no special treatment for anyone. I do ensure that anyone who is struggling with hotel quarantine gets support, and we have support arrangements in place for that situation.
So just to be clear on that, is that because she's a judge on a show that she's been granted this other quarantine?
No, she has a COVID safe plan that is being managed by an independent third party. That's the reason that she got that exemption.
And that's obviously not incurring any charges because it's her own accommodation, is that right?
It's not incurring any charges to the state, to the Queensland government. She's funding all those arrangements.
How serious?
She got her job. She got it because she works in the entertainment industry. You mentioned those different industries. Is that right?
Yeah, there are a number of people who have come under that category who I've given an exemption to because they have third-party arrangements in place that I'm confident meet all the requirements that we have in place for hotel quarantine.
How serious does it need to get in New South Wales before the border closes again?
Well, it depends where we see these clusters go. So at the moment, they're all being followed up by New South Wales Health, so it will depend whether they start seeing broader spread outside that area.
Dr. Young, 18 Queenslanders, you said that they were in home quarantine currently.
Yes.
Given that they were at a known hotspot now, why are they not in hotel quarantine or in better isolation than just at home?
Yeah. So that will be brought in from midday today.
But given the cluster, would it not be more prudent to isolate them further?
Well, actually, I'm not concerned about this group. This group came forward voluntarily and said they'd been there and got tested. So I'm quite comfortable that they understand the risk, they've been spoken with, and so I'm comfortable that they're fine in home quarantine. This is about people coming across the border in the future.
Does that mean that the rule from now on in terms of anyone coming from any state is that if they have been to a hotspot or they home quarantine now versus hotel?
No, I've only declared those hotspots at midday today. As happened with Victoria, that declaration was made at a point in time, and people after that point in time had to go into hotel quarantine.
That remains the same for Victoria then? This is just the home quarantine specific for people in the New South Wales hotspots, is that right?
No, I've not been clear. So once a declaration is made that a part of Australia is now a hotspot, once that declaration comes into force, anyone who has been in that area within the previous 14 days and they come into Queensland after the declaration is made, they are then required to go into hotel quarantine. Is that clear?
So that takes
No, if I've not made it clear, that's my fault.
I understand. So the people who come from New South Wales, they're allowed to quarantine at home. But people coming from Victoria can
No.
have quarantine at a hotel. Or it's just everyone's at home now.
No. So as of midday today, so in a couple hours' time, anyone who comes from a declared hotspot must quarantine in a hotel. New South Wales is only being made a declared hotspot at midday today. So Victoria's been a declared hotspot since last week, so all of the people who've been in Victoria have to quarantine in a hotel.
So then why are the 18 people allowed to quarantine at home?
Because it's not yet a declared hotspot. It won't be a declared hotspot till midday, 3 hours' time.
Just to confirm, it's just those two suburbs, Campbelltown?
Two cities, Campbelltown City and Liverpool
So
City.
it's the council area?
The local government authority, yes.
Dr. Young, on those 38 cases you provide exemptions, speaking broadly rather than a specific case, can you paint a picture of the medical threshold you're looking for in terms of seriousness of medical condition?
I don't provide exemptions on medical grounds. I provide exemptions because I'm confident that this process they've put in place will adequately protect the Queensland community if any of the people who are in quarantine were to be positive. It's not on health grounds or medical grounds. It's because the system they've got in place is adequate. There have been a few cases where I've provided exemptions from hotel quarantine because of extreme mental health risks.
Deputy Premier, in terms of up to 6 months of imprisonment, is that only for people who don't fill out the border declaration properly, or is that for other directions as well?
That penalty will be available to enforce any of the health directions. It will be an additional tool available to our public health officers as well as police enforcing the directions.
Just on John Paul Langbrook's photo, what did you think of that? Did you think that was undermining the message a bit?
Yeah, I thought that was pretty disappointing, a bit reckless. I guess it demonstrates that some members of the LNP perhaps aren't taking this as seriously as they should be. I think I was fairly measured in the comments that I made about it in asking for him to apologise. I think it was disappointing that he didn't. I guess it's now up to the opposition leader to determine what's appropriate.
Minister, what would you say to the Queenslanders who've seen the situation with Danny Minogue? They're having to quarantine in the hotels. They feel hard done by that perhaps a celebrity is getting better treatment than they are.
Look, I can understand why it might look that way and why some might portray it that way. As I understand from the advice that Dr. Young has provided to me, the quarantine arrangements in place in this instance mirror, if not greater, than the arrangements in the hotel quarantine. They incorporate contract security as well as testing, and so those requirements will ensure that Queenslanders are kept safe. They are being administered by a trusted third party, all at her own expense.
Does that require them to be monitored by, I mean, you're saying they're stronger, we're seeing ADF and police at hotels. Does that mean they're being monitored by police and the ADF, or is someone guarding that house to make sure they don't leave?
Do you want to talk to this one?
So that independent third party is responsible for ensuring that the individual maintains quarantine.